Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending where you are based. It's just gone 2 o'clock UK time, so we are going to start the third global webinar for the EMEISIG of Bali. You're very welcome, and it's great to see so many of you with us today. So my name is Daniela Standen. I'm the secretary for the SIG, and I am joined today by Mustafa, who's our committee coordinator, and Rhona Lohan, Emma Dafouz, Meredith Doran, and Jacob Riker, who are our presenters today. We've got Ben and Aileen that I can see from the committee as well. Hi, everybody. And I'm not sure, there might be others, but I just can't see them on my screen at the moment. So today we are together for the next hour and a half or so. And we are going to talk about EMI lecturer professional development, good practices and successful models. We will have one presentation first with some Q&A, and then another presentation that will follow with a Q&A and a final sort of summary at the end. This meeting is being recorded. You should see it on your screen. So just a reminder that that is the case. And if you don't wish to be recorded, keep your camera switched off. So you'll just be a little icon and nothing else. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first two presenters. We've got Emma Dafouz is a full professor in the Department of English Studies at Complutense University of Madrid. Since the 2000s, her research has dealt with understanding the roles of language in education, both in bilingual CLIL programs and in English medium higher education. She served as advisor for curricular internationalization at the university from 2014 to 2019 and developed the plan for internationalization. She has published extensively on English medium education. Her most recent books are Road Mapping, English Medium Education in the Internationalized University. And I think I'm going to leave it there. And we also, the co-presenter is Rhona Lohan, who is a PhD candidate in applied linguistics at the same university, Complutense University in Madrid. She's also a lecturer in EAP and scientific research at ESIC. It's the acronym, University in Madrid. Her research interests include English medium education in multilingual university settings, academic writing, and social linguistics. Currently, she's involved in a longitudinal comparative study exploring the impact of EME on English proficiency. So thank you very much, Emma and Rhona. We can see your slides. So I will give you a 5-minute time note before your presentation time is up. Thank you very much. You can start.
Well, thank you very much, Daniela, for that presentation. Basically, just thank the organization for inviting us to this session. I think it's a great opportunity to reach out to the EAP community, which is an area that I'm very, very interested in, particularly with regard to what's happening with English medium education. I've actually worked very much on understanding, on theorizing what is going on, and try to offer some kind of a support and understanding. So this is basically what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about, how teacher professional development in EME has a number of ongoing challenges. I should say that I'm talking while my co-presenter Rhona is got the slide, so if there's a little bit of a disadjustment, please bear with us. Then we're going to be talking about English medium education in multilingual university setting, which is this acronym that we've developed some time ago, and I'll get back to that later. And also the road mapping framework, which is a framework, again, designed a decade ago already, or even a little bit more, where we actually look at the or understand English medium education from a global and more social linguistic perspective. And what we're going to do is present the road mapping for those of you that don't know it, and those of you that do, it'll be brief, but basically the idea would be to exemplify its use in ESIC University, which is the business university where Rhona has worked for many, many years. And then we'll actually focus on the conclusions and the implications for the EAP profession. Right. Very quickly, and I'm sure all of you are very familiar with this, kind of simple way of presenting some of these challenges. Particularly in the Spanish setting where I'm based, there's the beginning of English medium education actually developed a lot of concern for English proficiency, both for lecturers, mainly because those are the ones that were actually experiencing a change in medium of instruction, and also the students involved. So some of the initial professional development was very much focused on supporting English proficiency. But of course, later on, it was revealed that pedagogy was equally important, and a lot of the content teachers that were turning to EME definitely needed some pedagogical support for content development. The notion of disciplinary literacies, I won't talk about it right now, but I mean, for me or for us, disciplinary literacies is a kind of meeting ground where EME professionals and EAP professionals can actually work together in supporting the students involved. And another aspect which is fundamental was a lot of research that's been a lot of concerned about what are the roles and responsibilities that the different stakeholders involved should develop. So is, for example, language the responsibility of EME lecturers, or is it ESP and EAP? What about EFL? I mean, what are the roles of these different realms in developing or in successful English medium education? Again, very quickly, this is a study that was conducted some years ago now with a number of European universities, basically, who's providing the training for these lecturers at the time. And you have some of the figures there that over 68% of the training comes from language centers, therefore English proficiency, English department or education departments. 8% comes from other sources, externally hired trainers, for example, lobbies or organizations such as EAIE, the European Association of International Education, also British Council, for example, in Spain and other settings. Other universities that actually have the training, could be national or international, it could be other sources as well. Or then a combination of both the in-house training and externally hired trainers. But basically, what we want to offer here, next slide, please, Rhona, is we want to talk about EMEMUS or EMEMUS. I mean, I'm not normative about the way we pronounce this acronym, but basically the question is, what are we talking about when we talk about EMI or when we talk about EMEMUS, as I said, our preferred term? We're really emphasizing the importance of, or the role of English medium education in these multilingual university settings. Okay, if you notice, we're moving away from the EMI idea, because I think EMI only tells half the story. It doesn't actually go into, understanding multilingualism in its widest sense, because we're actually looking into classrooms that are much more mixed, much more heterogeneous than ever, in which students have different linguistic repertoires that come into play. And these multilingual classrooms could be the result of top-down regulations, universities deciding that they are going to go bi or multilingual, or even bottom-up realities, as I said, these repertoires that all participants bring into the classroom. Notice that we also use the term inclusive because we're talking about instruction. I mean, sorry, we're moving away from the idea of instruction and we're focusing on learning as a co-constructed view. And we also look at different types of pedagogical approaches and different types of education. Could be online, on-site, or hybrid. And then we also believe that it has to be EMEMUS. There's a very big difference between talking about education and other levels of education, and we think university settings are very particular. You know, students normally most often go there on a voluntary basis. They are advanced learners, often linguistically and conceptually, and the setting is by definition, although this could be questioned, but much more international than prior levels of education. Okay, so the road mapping framework is, as I said, a framework that we developed some years ago. And basically what it tries to do is it tries to pull together very fragmented views of, or studies or research on English medium education and trying to pull them together by looking at the complexity of EME and looking at it very holistically. So we adopt a social linguistic approach in which you know, we also take into account the ecology of language, where, you know, we take into account the different languages that come into play in this setting. And we also look at language policies and how they're implemented. And we look at discourse as point of access. Basically, the idea of a point of access of discourse, because a lot of the activities, a lot of the realities that happen in English medium education or in education in general are mediated through language. And this figure represents these 6 dimensions. There are 6 dimensions, which together, if we follow them, are form the acronym road mapping. It's roles of English, academic disciplines, language management, agents, practices and processes, and internationalization and glocalization. I'm going to touch upon them very, very quickly so that later Rhona can retake them by actually exemplifying the, you know, their realization in her university. Okay, so roles of English in relation to other languages basically refers to what are the functions of English in that setting. Are we talking about English as for specific purposes? Are we talking about English as a lingua franca or as a foreign language? What are the roles that English plays in a particular setting, and how does it relate to other languages with which sometimes it might have a rather complicated or contested relationship? The other dimension is called academic disciplines, and with academic disciplines, we're referring to the different types of genres, the different types of communicative practices, the different outputs that are prototypical of each discipline. Here we have examples from engineering or physics. I mean, this is probably a simple way of presenting the complexity, but, you know, different disciplines come from with different communicative practices. Language management is our third dimension, and it refers to the decisions and the regulations on language use. For example, curriculum specifications, what are the language and content aims, for example, and these and management can operate at different levels. So we can have a supranational level, which, for example, could be the European Union. Then we could have a national level, which could be the ministry. Regional would be, you know, regional governments, municipal, institutional, the universities themselves. And the idea that these levels often are multi-layered. They're multi-layered, and therefore the different policies, different language management policies come into place. And the fourth dimension would be agents, and these agents refers to the stakeholders who are the participants in these educational practices. Are we talking about teachers? Are we talking about decision makers? Are we talking about the university as such? And of course, these agents, are we talking about professional developers, which is the focus today? And these agents definitely can be represented collectively, individually, in an abstract manner, and it's important to see who they are and how they actually understand the setting in order to develop programs adequately. Next slide, yeah. And the last two slides are practices and processes, and internationalization and glocalization. And practices and processes, which is the one that we'll be focusing on today, refers to the activities, the teaching and learning activities that occur, that construct and are constructed by EMEMUS. So things like what kind of methodological changes or adaptations are taking place, or are they taking place, or are they not? What kind of assessment is going on? What kind of teaching formats are the teachers using? Is it very lecture-based? Is it student-centered? What kind of resources and materials? And how is professional development offered or conceptualized in these settings? And finally, our last dimension is known as internationalization and glocalization. We have a definition there by Jane Knight that talks about the integration of international, intercultural, global dimensions into the purpose and functions of post-secondary education. The interesting part about internationalization is also its combination with the local context. So not only do we have international or global forces, but also we have the local context and the local languages that need to be taken together, need to interrelate in order to understand the setting adequately. And one thing before Rhona takes over, the idea that this road mapping, this figure, is actually used. All the different dimensions have to come into play. All the different dimensions have to come into play. And although we haven't, we don't have enough time to actually see all this in detail, whatever dimension you might be foregrounding, in this case is professional development, it has to be examined from all the different dimensions in order to obtain this holistic and dynamic picture. Thank you. Rhona, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emma. Well, now it's my turn to illustrate the situated analysis we conducted in ESIC University. Now, our investigation wanted to go beyond English language exposure and investigate in detail which contextual factors may play a role in students' language development in EME. Hence, it seemed fitting to apply the road mapping framework to comprehensively examine the setting. Now, as Emma mentioned, my role as a lecturer for over 15 years in the university enabled a more EMEC approach, an insider view of the university. This enabled me to examine, collect the data through examining the websites, interviewing staff, and then conducting classroom and general on-site observations. But then road mapping helped make sense of the data, as it is a more holistic, dynamic, and comprehensive way to examine the complex socialistic reality of English thought scenarios. The RM dimensions, as Emma mentioned, they should not be considered in isolation. They interact dynamically. So as I go through each dimension in relation to ESIC, you will see the interrelatedness of the dimensions, and which uncover the intricate connections between them, and it allows one to look beyond the obvious. EME itself is what we would consider provides a natural laboratory for researchers to explore the interplay between social factors, institutional practices, and how students learn. So furthermore, road mapping serves as a valuable conceptual model, enabling us to connect policy decisions, pedagogical approaches, and student outcomes. So now let's look at the descriptive factors, but first, a brief introduction to ESIC University. ESIC, it's a private business university in Madrid, Spain. It has bachelor's degrees in both English and in the home language Spanish. It has over 3,000 undergraduates and 600 incoming international students on an annual basis. And the faculty is made up of academics, but also an interesting element of our faculty are practitioners, people who work in the local market, also teach courses here. Now, as Emma pointed out, the dimensions of road mapping are non-linear, so one can focus in on different dimensions at different times. And with this in mind, and the focus of today's talk being on professional development, I will begin with practices and processes in ESIC. Now, one of the most notable practices here in ESIC is the collaboration between content and EAP lecturers. This collaboration is a direct result of a top-down university initiative, specifically mandated interdepartmental meetings. The true catalyst emerged through the conversations these meetings sparked. Crucially, these meetings gave lecturers the opportunity to address linguistic issues openly and share specific disciplinary projects, which led to tailor-made EAP courses. The EAP lecturers incorporated specific content into their courses, giving students the opportunity to practice newly developed skills from the content courses and transfer them into English, or be taught the language they needed to develop them in their EME programs. Now, later on, I will explain the meetings in more detail in the language management dimension. But first, let's look over here. Beyond this collaborative approach, the importance of group work is also a key aspect of ESIC practices. Now, it is actively encouraged in all subjects and actually makes up 30% of the overall grade. Group work is considered essential for building communities, a key aspect of both business universities and business practices. But as Smith noted, it also fosters more language involvement from uninhibited EME students. Finally, a key revelation in this study or investigation was the content lecturers' assessment of written assignments. It was found that they penalized Spanish spelling mistakes, but not English. This variation in assessment criteria, depending on the language medium of the subject, was clearly stipulated in the course syllabi. And when interviewed, these lecturers expressed that they did not feel in a position to penalize English spelling errors, as they were not language teachers. More on this to come now. The beliefs of EME lecturers regarding their role in addressing language issues begs more attention, which is why I will now move into the agents dimension. Now, in the agents dimension, we'll focus on the beliefs of EME lecturers. As I mentioned before, they primarily identify as content specialists here in ESIC, and therefore do not feel responsible for addressing English language issues. And this aligns with the TAEC report from 2019. This becomes particularly relevant when considering that these lecturers often teach in both English and Spanish mediums, leading to the observed discrepancies in assessment. Whereas EAP lecturers, with their pedagogical training background, play a vital role. They actively initiate collaborations with content lecturers and consistently adapt their classes to students' needs, employing a practical approach. The work is consistently recognized in students' evaluations here. And as in Arnaud and Messias et al.'s research, it aligns with these observations, highlighting the positive impact of a practical student-centered approach on student evaluations. We also need to consider the EME students' beliefs. We have found here that they believe that their English language proficiency will improve through their EME studies. Now, this expectation creates a clear conflict with the content lecturers' views. It's also important to note that many students enrolled in EME courses in ESIC have done so because they believed it would open more doors for them in the future. But now an interesting agent is the university itself. This is a private business university with high fees, opposed to public universities in Spain, which are mostly highly subsidized. This university, though, is committed to providing English for all students, believing it enhances their international status. How this is implemented will be discussed in the language management dimension later. But first, let's briefly look at the academic disciplines and language mediums in this university. This university, as you can see, offers a range of academic disciplines, including, marketing, business administration, international business, advertising and public relations, and digital business. You can see that the instruction is delivered in both English and Spanish mediums. And we also have a bilingual bachelor degree where the first 2 years of digital business are in the home language Spanish and the last 2 years of the degree are in English. But the dual language context is central to this university's internationalization strategy, which is resulting in English for academic purpose courses for all students. In the EME strand, they receive 60 hours, one course, whereas in the Spanish medium and the bilingual programs, they receive up to 240 hours in their first 2 years. Moving on to language management, the language policies here are created top-down, but while the Spanish is the managing language, communications are bilingual. You will find in public announcements on the campus are in both Spanish and English, and this ensures that all international staff and students receive the information. Regarding certification, all EME lecturers must achieve a minimum of a C1 level certificate. All EME students must have a minimum of a B2 level certificate, whereas no language certificate is required for the Spanish medium education students or bilingual programs. Moving on to English as a course subject, these EAP courses comprise of 6 ECTS credits, and students are required to take an internal placement test for level Pacific grouping. This is to create a more supportive learning environment. But implementing this policy comes with a cost for this university because it implies more classes and hiring of extra EAP lecturers, which sets the language department apart as the only one authorized in the university to offer smaller class sizes. Another policy is the obligatory interdepartmental meetings for all lecturers. This top-down initiative was created to aid lecturers in aligning exam dates and visualizing student content for the semester. However, it actually led to bottom-up initiatives from EAP lecturers and fostered interdisciplinary collaborations, as discussed previously in the PP dimension. Additionally, the university takes a systematic approach to the design and follow-up of the course syllabi. The syllabi outlines the general aims, learning outcomes, evaluation process, and assessment criteria. They must be uploaded to the learning language management system and presented to the students on the very first day of each course. And throughout the course, students often refer to them, especially focusing on the assessment criteria. Now turning to the roles of English in relation to other language. It is important to point out the other languages at play in this setting. You can see English and Spanish, the predominant languages, but there are available French and Chinese courses. Plus, there is an array of international students, which naturally bring more languages to this bilingual, multilingual university.
Rhona, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. EME in this setting is a vehicle for content learning with no pedagogical adoption. And as noted previously, there is no or little attention paid to language issues. Okay, so I'll go quicker. So moving on to the EAP, we receive, whereas in the EAP courses, they receive explicit language training and their academic language skills are honed. Because of the collaborations with the content lectures, ESP has become more prominent with more Pacific disciplinary literaries and connected to content courses. And whereas English is the common language in the EME programs due to the number of international students, many of whom who don't speak Spanish. This has meant that lecturers do not feel that they can have translanguaging practices, and they're deemed exclusionary, which was similar to findings like Kadiva et al. And this brings me on to my final dimension, internationalization and glocalization. These are key driving forces at ESIC University. Like many universities, ESIC views internationalization as a means to increase its global rankings. However, it also maintains strong relations with the local market. by providing students with extended internship placements and also by inviting practitioners to deliver talks and teach courses here. The staff are actively encouraged to engage in staff mobility, and also all students are pushed towards participating in Erasmus or Mundi programs. And finally, as the university places internationalisation as a core aspect of university life, emphasising the importance of English for all subjects. So where does these bring us, our conclusions? Road mapping allowed us to explore the university itself as a key agent responsible for centralising the language management policies and implementing them from a top-down perspective. This revealed a coordinated effort to organise interdepartmental meetings between content lecturers and EAP lecturers, which contributed significantly to the design of language-oriented course syllabi. The interdisciplinary approach led to the inclusion of specific business practices, which influenced the activities and methodologies that content and EAP lecturers used. The framework also highlighted differences in assessment practices, depending on the language medium. And most importantly, from the ING perspective, it emphasizes internationalization as the core part of university life, which led to this English for all students approach. So now, what are the factors for a peaceful coexistence? We have one instrumental factor would be institutional support. This can be demonstrated by opening EAP courses, encouraging interdepartmental meetings, and by providing the necessary resources and backing, universities can create an environment where both EAP and content lecturers feel valued and empowered. Professional development opportunities should be made available for all lecturers, as it not only enhances teaching skills, but it also promotes mutual understanding and respect for each other's roles. Aligning the objectives of EAP and EME courses is key to creating a cohesive curriculum. By working together, you can identify overlapping goals and complementary content, and lecturers can provide a seamless learning experience for their students. And finally, systematic collaboration. A structured and intentional approach to collaboration is essential. By establishing clear guidelines and regular communication channels, EAP and content lecturers can work together more effectively, ensuring that their efforts are aligned and complementary. A systematic collaboration involves setting common goals and creating joint projects that benefit both EAP and content lecturers. And this approach hopefully helps to break down silos and encourages a more integrated teaching experience. And on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma and Rhona, for a truly interesting presentation and thought-provoking presentation.